Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to today's online presentation titled Following the Rules, Public Retirement Plan Compliance. Now I would like to introduce you to Kathy Eidelberg, Senior Vice President and National Director of Segal's Public Sector Market.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome to today's session, which is an important one for following the due diligence required by public plan administrators and trustees to look at your plan from time to time to see that it is in compliance with state, federal laws that govern public pension plans. And so today we're going to look at a number of issues, and we're going to look at the goals and the process of a compliance review. We're going to have a case study presented from the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement System, talk about the role of the legal counsel, what does an operational review cover, the scope of a compliance review, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. Our speakers today are Phyllis Chambers, who is the Executive Director of the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement System, and she will be presenting a case study. Also, David Powell, who is a principal with Groom Law Group, and Melanie Walker, who is with Segal. He's an attorney, and she's the Segal's public sector compliance leader. So we have a very distinguished panel. I also just want to remind you is that the discussion we're having today is a procedural one. We're going to talk about the how-tos and what the results can be of a compliance review. We strongly suggest that if you're thinking of doing such a review, that you talk to your fund's counsel, as nothing in this presentation should be construed to be legal advice. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get into the details of what is a compliance review, let's begin by looking at the overall goals we hope to achieve when we conduct a review. One important goal is to determine whether the written documents governing the plan satisfy requirements to be considered a qualified plan under the Internal Revenue Code. We also want to examine how the plan operates on a daily basis to see if that is consistent with how the plan says it will operate in its own written procedures. Another important goal is to identify risks to the plan. By risks, I mean things like the risk that the plan does not meet qualification requirements, as I just mentioned. Another risk could be that the plan's fiduciaries are not fulfilling their duties, such as by not sufficiently monitoring individuals or vendors that administer the plan. Another risk to the plan may be that there are insufficient internal controls to minimize errors in plan administration, so that the plan assets are not being properly expended for their intended purpose. For example, we may look at the frequency of administrative errors or whether there are overpayments to retirees and how large those payments are. A review seeks to determine the cause of those errors in order to correct them. Identifying areas of administration that are not in compliance with federal, state requirements and correcting those problems are another important goal of a compliance review. Also, in my experience reviewing public plans, they often want to know if they're in line with how peer retirement systems are operating. The last 2 points here describe some ancillary benefits to your plan from conducting a compliance review. By delving into the minute details of plan administration, can provide an opportunity to educate administrative staff, especially on areas of compliance that do not come up very often. For example, when doing a review that looks into the plan, how the plan complies with 415 rules. We often observe plan personnel learning new details about these particularly complex rules. And finally, going through the process of a compliance review can help the plan develop its own internal procedures for reviewing plan operations periodically. This may be as simple as identifying problem areas of administration so that the plan knows they need to keep checking on these areas periodically. Now let's briefly walk through the process of a compliance review. I will describe how the Segal Company conducts a compliance review, and that should give you an idea of what to expect from a review in general. A compliance review begins with a data request for all of the plan's written documentation. For example, the governing plan documents, whether they're in the form of statutes or a separate written document, We also want to look at the plan's written procedures and any type of communications provided to members. We ask for records that the plan's fiduciary should be maintaining, including contracts with vendors and professionals, as well as government filings like a determination letter or private letter ruling. And we want to see any prior compliance reviews conducted. The purpose of this preliminary document review is to become familiar with your plan so that when we meet with you, we know the plan's basic design and structure. At that point, it's helpful to have an initial discussion between the reviewers and the plan to find out who the players are and how to best communicate with each other, perhaps set up a tentative timeline for the project, and talk about any areas that are of particular concern for the plan. What was the driving force behind wanting to do a compliance review?